It was a bit of a dilemma for King David, who was not yet quite king of Israel, but he had been anointed to be so. And now he finds himself fleeing from King Saul for his life. And he comes to Abiathar the priest, and the Abiathar the priest says, "No, I can't give you any bread because the only bread I have is holy bread or shew bread." And David said, "Let me have it for me and my men." And this broke tradition. Well, the question is it what was more important, that this bread that had been hallowed bread be handled as such, or the fact that David needed to have this substance because he was fleeing from Saul and his men? They needed the bread to be able to sustain life and to have the energy to go and fight and run. See, they were doing. There was another example that was given in the New Testament. This is the teachings of Jesus. He said, what if you have a sheep that had fallen into a pit and was down there in the heat of the day, no water? And if that sheep stays down there all day long with no water, that sheep's probably going to die. So what would you do? Hold to the traditions and the, quote, law, or would you take that lamb out of that pit? See, that's a dilemma. And so what Jesus was teaching was that God would have compassion on people. It's just like the wonderful story that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan, and how that the priest and the Levite, they come along and they saw this man down in the ditch, beaten and bruised, but they just went on their way. It says certain Samaritan, and I love the fact that he used the Samaritan as a hero of the story. He said, that man, he was concerned about the individual who was suffering down there in the ditch. Well, you bring this on, and you talk about the church and how that when the early church was being developed, this was a big issue in the early church in Jerusalem about, as a Christian, as a born-again Christian who believes that Jesus Christ fulfilled the law on Calvary's cross, and that we are saved by the blood of the Lamb and by our belief that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and by His grace we are saved. But in the early days of Jerusalem, it would seem that you would have to become a Jew first before you could become a Christian. And see, all that began to change as the gospel went out into the outer regions, in Antioch and Antioch Pisidia, these areas where the team of Paul and Barnabas delivered the gospel. They found people who were not Jews, but they were hungry for God. But see, the traditions would say, no, they can't have salvation. They can't inherit heaven because they're not Jews. And so the teachings that Paul and Barnabas began to teach the people, look, just believe upon the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. But others would come along later and say, no, you have to have these other things. And so the issue of breaking the traditions are just compassion and grace. This is Pastor Jack King with the gospel on the radio broadcast.